No, I don't want your money.
The envelope rested on the table like a final answer. Inside it was a number so large that it could erase years of struggle in one breath. Rent worries, tuition stress, unpaid bills, quiet prayers whispered at night. The man who placed it there was used to watching people hesitate, then surrender. But Nia Carter didn't reach for it. She pushed it back. And in that exact moment, Graham Whitmore, a billionaire who believed money controlled everything, realized he had just met someone he could not buy. Graham Whitmore had spent his entire adult life mastering one language: leverage. At 46, he was the founder and controlling force behind Whitmore Capital, a private investment empire with fingers in tech, real estate, healthcare, and finance. His calendar was managed down to the minute. His presence alone could move markets. People admired him. Some feared him. Many depended on him. Graham didn't see himself as cruel, only realistic. In his mind, the world ran on incentives. If someone resisted, it simply meant the offer wasn't big enough yet. That belief had built him everything. Until it didn't. Nia Carter lived a very different reality. At 22, her life was a careful balance of responsibility and hope. She worked as a library assistant at a community college outside Baltimore, shelving books, helping students navigate research databases, and quietly finishing her own coursework between shifts. She rented a small apartment with thin walls and a stubborn heater. She cooked simple meals. She kept her mother's old journal tucked in a drawer by her bed. After losing her mother during her sophomore year, Nia had learned quickly that survival required discipline. No shortcuts, no favors that came with strings. She believed deeply in one thing: if you accept the wrong help, you lose yourself. The collision of their worlds began quietly. While assisting a professor with nonprofit research, Nia noticed inconsistencies in publicly available grant data connected to the Whitmore Foundation, an organization praised for its commitment to education access. Numbers didn't line up. Reports felt inflated. Outcomes were vague. Nia double-checked, then triple-checked. She wasn't trying to expose anyone. She wasn't chasing attention. She simply couldn't ignore the truth. So she wrote a private email, measured, respectful, precise, detailing what she had found. She expected silence. 3 days later, her phone rang. The voice on the other end was calm, confident, unmistakably used to being heard. "This is Graham Whitmore." Nia froze. He thanked her for bringing the matter to his attention and asked to meet. No lawyers, no assistants, just a conversation. They chose a quiet cafe near the harbor neutral ground. Graham arrived exactly on time, dressed impeccably, carrying a leather briefcase that looked like it belonged in a boardroom, not a cafe. Nia arrived early, notebook in hand, steady but cautious. Graham listened as Nia spoke. She explained what she had found, how she verified it, why it mattered. Her voice didn't shake. She didn't accuse. She didn't flatter. That was the first thing that unsettled him. Most people tried to impress him or protect themselves. Nia did neither. When she finished, Graham smiled slightly and leaned back in his chair. "You're clearly very smart," he said, "and very principled." Then he reached into his briefcase and placed the envelope on the table. "A token of appreciation," he said smoothly, "for your discretion." To him, it was a clean solution. To her, it was a line. Nia looked at the envelope. Then she looked at Graham. And without drama, without anger, she slid it back toward him. "I didn't contact you for money," she said. "I contacted you because the truth matters." The smile left his face. "Everyone needs help," Graham replied. "There's no shame in accepting it." Nia's voice stayed calm. "There is shame," she said, "in selling your integrity." The cafe felt suddenly still. People like Graham were used to resistance, but not this kind. Not quiet, not unmovable. As Nia stood to leave, she added one last sentence. "I hope you fix what's wrong, not because you were caught, but because it's the right thing to do." Then she walked out, leaving the envelope untouched. Graham sat there long after she was gone. For the first time in decades, money had failed him. And that night, alone in his penthouse overlooking the city, he thought he controlled. One question refused to let him rest. What kind of man had he become? If someone with nothing had more integrity than he did. If this story interests you so far, please like the video and subscribe for more powerful stories like this. That night, Graham Whitmore stared at the city from his penthouse window, surrounded by glass, steel, and silence. He had closed deals worth billions. He had crushed competitors without blinking. He had bought loyalty, silence, admiration, even love. Yet a young woman with barely enough to get by had walked out of his life with something he no longer recognized in himself. Integrity. And for the first time in years, Graham couldn't sleep. Graham was used to problems. Problems could be solved. But this wasn't a problem with numbers or strategy. It was something deeper, something personal. Nia Carter's face kept appearing in his mind. Not angry, not afraid, just firm, certain. There is shame in selling your integrity. He poured himself a drink he didn't want and sat in the dark, replaying the meeting again and again. He told himself she was young, idealistic, inexperienced. He told himself the world would teach her otherwise. Yet something about the calm in her refusal disturbed him. She hadn't rejected the money out of pride. She had rejected it out of principle. And that made all the difference. 2 days later, Graham did something he hadn't done in years. He questioned his own people. He called in his chief financial officer, his foundation director, and 2 senior consultants. He didn't accuse. He simply asked for clarification, details behind the glossy reports, explanations behind the polished numbers. At first, they spoke confidently, then carefully, then defensively. That was when Graham knew. He ordered an internal audit, silent, independent, and thorough. What it uncovered was worse than Nia had suggested. Funds redirected through unnecessary intermediaries. Success metrics exaggerated. Programs designed more for publicity than impact. It wasn't illegal, but it wasn't honest. And for the first time, Graham felt something unfamiliar twist in his chest. Shame. Graham wasn't angry at Nia. He was angry at himself. For years, he had told himself that efficiency mattered more than purity, that results justified methods, that intentions were enough. But Nia had never talked about intentions. She talked about truth. And truth, he was realizing, didn't care how powerful you were. A week later, Graham found himself driving somewhere he had never planned to visit, a modest community youth center on the east side of the city. No press. No assistance. No announcement. He sat in his car for several minutes before going inside, unsure why he was even there. Through a cracked door, he saw Nia. She sat at a folding table surrounded by teenagers. Some distracted, some frustrated, some pretending not to care. She wasn't lecturing. She wasn't commanding attention. She was listening. When a boy slammed his notebook shut in frustration, she didn't scold him. She asked what he was stuck on. When a girl hesitated to read aloud, Nia encouraged her quietly, without drawing attention. There was no performance, just presence. Graham felt something shift again. Something heavy, something humbling. After the session ended, Nia stepped outside to gather her bag, and stopped when she saw him. Her expression tightened, just slightly. "I didn't expect to see you here," she said. "I didn't expect to be here," Graham replied honestly. There was an awkward pause. Then Graham did something that surprised even himself. "I owe you an apology," he said. Nia studied his face, searching for rehearsed words, hidden motives. "For offering you money," he continued, "when I should have offered accountability." She crossed her arms. Not defensive, just guarded. "And?" she asked. "And for building something that looked good, instead of something that was good." The silence stretched. Finally, she nodded once. "Apology accepted," she said. "But apologies don't fix systems." "I know," Graham replied. "That's why I'm here." They sat on a bench outside the center, the city moving around them. Graham turned to her. "If I wanted to fix it," he said, "really fix it, where would I start?" Nia didn't answer immediately. She had learned the hard way that powerful people often asked questions they didn't want real answers to. "You'd start," she said slowly, "by listening to the people your foundation claims to help. And then," he asked. "And then," she continued, "you'd accept that help isn't help if it costs someone their dignity." The words hit harder than any accusation, because they were true. Over the next few months, Graham did something radical. He dismantled parts of his foundation. Entire departments were shut down. Contracts were terminated. Advisors who had built careers around appearances were replaced with people who had lived experience. He stopped putting his name on every initiative. Quietly, deliberately, he asked Nia to review proposed changes, not as an employee but as an independent voice. First, she refused. "I won't be your shield," she said, "and I won't be your symbol." "I don't want either," Graham replied. "I want your honesty, even when it's uncomfortable." That gave her pause. They worked cautiously at first. Nia challenged assumptions Graham didn't even realize he held. She questioned metrics. She redirected funding priorities. She pushed for transparency that made board members uneasy. More than once, Graham considered pulling back. But each time, he remembered the envelope, and how easily he had believed money could solve everything. He let her push. He let her challenge him. And slowly, something changed. Not just in the foundation, but in Graham himself. Months later, standing in the back of a crowded conference hall, Graham watched Nia speak to a room full of policymakers, educators, and nonprofit leaders. She spoke with clarity, with confidence, without mentioning his name once. And as the audience applauded, Graham understood something he had never truly grasped before. Respect wasn't something you demanded. It was something you earned, often from the people you least expected. As the applause filled the conference hall, Graham Whitmore remained standing at the back, unnoticed. For the first time in his life, he wasn't the most important person in the room. And strangely, he didn't want to be. Nia Carter stepped down from the stage to warm handshakes and quiet congratulations. Policymakers, nonprofit leaders, educators, people who once ignored voices like hers, now leaned in to listen. She spoke with confidence, but not arrogance. With clarity, but not bitterness. She never mentioned Graham. She didn't need to. Her ideas stood on their own. Graham watched her from a distance, remembering the young woman who had sat across from him in a cafe, pushing back an envelope that could have changed her life overnight. She had changed his instead. Over the next year, the Whitmore Foundation became almost unrecognizable. Gone were the glossy press releases and inflated claims. In their place came transparency reports, community-led boards, and long-term programs shaped by the people they served. Some donors pulled out. Some board members resigned. Graham let them go. For the first time, his decisions weren't driven by reputation, but by responsibility. And Nia was there through it all. Not as a figurehead. Not as a symbol. As a partner. Not everyone applauded Graham's transformation. Business associates questioned his judgment. Media outlets speculated about his motives. Some accused him of trying to rewrite his legacy. Late one evening, after a difficult board meeting, Graham asked Nia a question he had never voiced aloud. "Was it worth it?" he asked. "Losing all of that?" Nia didn't answer immediately. "Depends," she said finally. "What do you think you lost?" Graham thought about it. Influence, control, certainty. Then he thought about what he had gained. Clarity, respect, peace. "I think," he said slowly, "I lost the illusion that money made me a good man." Nia nodded. That illusion costs a lot of people more than they realize. Months later, Graham was invited to speak at a national economic forum, one he had attended many times before. This time, the question was familiar. "Mr. Whitmore," the moderator said, "what has been the most important lesson of your career?" The audience expected a story about risk, or innovation, or strategy. Graham paused. Then he said, "The most important lesson of my life didn't come from a boardroom." The room grew quiet. "It came from a young woman who refused my money, and reminded me that integrity has no price." There was a murmur in the audience. Somewhere near the front, Nia sat quietly, hands folded, expression calm. Graham continued, "She taught me that power doesn't come from what you can buy, but from what you refuse to compromise." The applause was slow at first. Then it grew. After the event, Graham found Nia standing alone near the exit. "I hope you don't mind," he said, "that I told that story." She smiled slightly. "It wasn't your story to begin with," she replied. "But you told it right." They stood there for a moment. "You know," Graham said, "that envelope still sits in my desk." Nia raised an eyebrow. "Uncashed, untouched. Good," she said. "Let it remind you." "It does," he replied. "Every day." Years later, when journalists asked about Graham Whitmore's legacy, they talked less about his wealth and more about the systems he helped change. And when they asked Nia Carter about her rise, she always said the same thing. "I didn't change a billionaire. I just refused to be bought." Money can create comfort. Power can create access. But respect is earned by character. And sometimes the greatest lesson a billionaire can learn comes from the one person who walks away from the money. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who believes integrity still matters.